What is going on, wrestling fans? Welcome back to the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. We're talking today about AEW Revolution 2025. Big crowd for AEW in this pay-per-view. Looks good on camera. Again, it's been a while. It's been a while since we've had an AEW pay-per-view. You can kind of technically count the Australia show, I guess, to some extent. It was kind of like a mini B-list big event for them, but it's been since December, since World's End, and the pay-per-view, and that's where AEW shines. Before we get into that, I want to remind you guys, of course, as always, to hit that like button, subscribe button, and the notification bell. If you enjoy videos like this, be sure to share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, wherever you talk about pro wrestling and sports entertainment. AEW, the good, the bad, and the ugly of Revolution 2025. I'm going to start with the negatives. I'm going to start with the negatives that I had with the show. This is a very interesting dichotomy, again, between the two big wrestling companies in North America. WWE, having just watched Elimination Chamber a couple weeks ago, my complaint with that is that it was a very long show with only 4 matches. This show is a very long show with too many matches. I think you could have shaved 2 matches off the card, and this would have been, and move 1 match to the main event, and this would have been a great show. Having just mentioned the main event, of course, the main event was a disappointment on this show. There are a number of reasons for that, but we'll get into that as we get through the highlights of the show as well. There are 2 matches I think you probably could have shaved off of this. You probably could have put Okada and Brody King's match on a Dynamite as a main event. And Mercedes, against, I'm sorry to say it, it's random Joshi number 54 for Mercedes Moné. I wonder if in her contract she's supposed to be on every pay-per-view and they just didn't have a storyline for her, because there's plenty of women now on the AEW women's roster, which actually is a highlight of AEW now after so many years of the women's division being kind of the low point of AEW. Now it's like the best thing in AEW. And you still have, yes, she's faced Statlander, yes, she's faced Willow, but there's a lot of other women on that roster. I would have loved to see her and Julia Hart go up against each other at some point in time. I'd love to see her. Serena Deeb would have been a decent match for her to have. There's plenty of women. Thunder Rosa, I would love to see Thunder Rosa and Mercedes go at it for the TBS championship, but we'll get to that hopefully sometime in the future. No offense again to the women they bring in from other companies, but I think AEW's women's roster is so deep now, you don't need to do that anymore. And I think it only helps to have the women who are on the roster, who are there week in and week out, as they did with Harley Cameron, as they did with some other wrestlers. I think you have enough other high-profile women wrestlers in AEW that Mercedes doesn't need to do these kind of matches anymore. The only other negative of the show is that it did get a little bit gratuitous in one match in particular, and we'll cover that one when we get to that match. Outside of that, the most of this show, I would say this is definitely a recommended show. You start off with Hangman Page against MJF, and these guys have a great match to kick off the show, reminding you that, yes, again, this is an AEW pay-per-view, and if there is one thing that AEW does better than almost probably any other wrestling company in the world, I don't care who you're talking to, if you like wrestling matches, they have the best wrestling matches, bar none, on their pay-per-views. Their pay-per-views are just like a smorgasbord of just high-energy wrestling in-ring content. That's what AEW is. AEW is something else, and I will address this here because I have seen some other people talk about it in some reviews and stuff. Here's the thing about AEW at this point in time. We're 5 years into this thing. Again, I love to draw comparisons. I'll compare it to, I think a lot of people are watching AEW expecting it to be like WWE or wanting it to be like WWE or something comparable to that. And it's apples and oranges to an extent because, if this was movies, I would say like these are people going to see a Quentin Tarantino movie expecting the MCU and complaining that there's a lot of blood and there's a lot of bad language and it's raw and gritty and it's not polished and there are like things that are a little weird and off the wall and don't make a lot of sense. Like, that's a Tarantino movie and that's AEW. There's a lot of blood, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of language, there's a lot of really crazy characters. There are a lot of things that don't seem to make sense on the surface. but some of them actually make a lot of sense. MJF and Hangman's match made a lot of sense. These are two pillars, as they kept reminding us on the broadcast, of AEW. They, along with, I guess Darby, I don't know where Darby, I guess Darby's on up in the mountains right now, hopefully, and Sammy Guevara, who's kind of fallen off, but Hangman and Jack Perry. But I would say now, after this night, I think we definitely seen who should be in the main event scene, who should be in the world title scene for the rest of the year at AEW, and matches between a certain set of guys. I would put Hangman and MJF in there. A nasty spot where MJF does a tombstone on Hangman on the outside of the ring onto a chair that was propped up against the barricade. That looked crazy. Would be just a harbinger for what the rest of the night was going to be. Hangman gets the decisive win in this match, hitting Christopher Daniels' finisher on MJF. MJF falls flat on his face. It looked nasty as hell. And Hangman getting a clean win. I think this is good for Hangman, and I can kind of see, the Hangman Swerve storyline is not over with, and you can already kind of get a sense that they may be lining those two up to meet again at some point again in 2025, and I'm not going to complain about that. We cover Mercedes Moné's match, not much of the right home about there. Konosuke Okada defended, I always got to get these championships straight, the Continental Championship against Brody King. This is a good coming out party for Brody King in his singles career. His first, well, not his first major match like this, but this is a big highlight spot for him. Since the House of Black is no longer, and now that he and Buddy and Julia are now the Hounds of Hell, Cerberus, essentially, they're trying to push Brody. It's going to take a while. I think we're probably a good year away from Brody winning a title, but at this point in time, that guy's put so much work into AEW. One of the unsung heroes, especially during those Continental Classic tournaments, is Brody King, and his feuds with Darby Allin were just amazing. Great showing for him here. He does fall to one Rainmaker from Kazuchika Okada. Okada, I expect to be undefeated. If the plan is for him and Omega to kind of converge at All In, I don't think Okada's going to be eating too many L's on the way to that match. So it was an okay match, nothing really crazy to write home about. Another one that's not much to write home about, the Outrunners teaming up in their biggest match in their tag team careers in AEW, challenging for the World Tag Team Championships against the Hurt Syndicate. MVP leading Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin to the ring, and boy, their promo before the show was really good. It was really awesome. The Hurt Syndicate is one of the coolest things in AEW, and I have a problem with this booking to an extent, because I would have rather had this match been Brian Cage and Lance Archer, the Murder Machines, against the Hurt Syndicate. That is, and I still think that's in the cards, obviously, or hopefully, but that's the matchup you wanted to see. The Outrunners, yeah, they're a great gimmick tag team, but they are just a gimmick tag team, and the gimmick got exposed in this match. I'm gonna not be nice about this, because it's just glaringly obvious in watching this match, which is a very short match. They do not belong in a ring with Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin. There was a lot of botches in this match, that a lot of places where they just didn't know where to go. They got, probably the butterflies got to them, it looked at some point in time. I'm not sure, obviously, can't read minds, but they looked outmatched. Not just kayfabe, but from a performance standpoint, they can't perform with guys the talent of Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, who easily win this match and retain the tag titles. A lot of people have comments about it, say, like, well, what are you going to do with them? The tag team scene's messed up. What do you do with them is very obvious. FTR, Young Bucks. You want the Hurt Syndicate to beat those two tag teams. You want you want to play it up that there's a legitimate chance that, this is the Young Bucks and FTR, two of the greatest tag teams of the last decade. The Hurt Syndicate wants those wins on their mantle. That's the storyline right there. So throw them against those two teams, and eventually, hopefully, I would prefer if it was the Hounds of Hell, the Hell Dogs or whatever, Buddy and Brody to win the tag titles from the Hurt Syndicate. I think that all that would be a great move for the tag team division at AEW, which has been suffering, which has done the reverse of the women's division. It used to be one of the highlights of AEW was the tag division, and now it's like, God, I mean, and where the Private Party, have we found out where they are? Where did they go? They came back and they won the titles, they lost them, and they're gone. So, where happened to Taven? And anyway, that's AEW, man. Sometimes, some of the things they do boggle the mind sometimes. Then we got into a run of really good matches on this show. And I say really good matches. This reminds you of why AEW, like I said before, has the best wrestling pay-per-views of any company. 3 back-to-back bangers in this one. Actually, there's 4 bangers. There's 4 more bangers. I almost forgot one. I almost left out one because I forgot it wasn't the main event. Another banger that came up earlier in the card was Ricochet and Swerve Strickland. Now, the winner of this match would be the number 1 contender for the AEW World Championship. Plus, there's all of the backstory with Prince Nana and the robe and his heritage, and Ricochet taking the robe and desecrating it, putting his stupid logo on the robe and doing all this stuff with it. Swerve and Nana having some inner turmoil. Nana's like, hey, look, Swerve, you got to do this for me. If you don't get my family's, my legacy back, I might not be able to do this with you anymore. At one point in the match, Swerve accidentally pushes Nana. Nana flips him off and leaves. Ricochet and Swerve, by the way, have an amazing match. This could be in the running for match of the year contender in any other year. I think this year, the match of the years from all the wrestling companies over the last couple of years has been getting ridiculously high. So this in a year 5 years ago would easily be a match of the year. It might just be a match of the month in this current environment, but it definitely was one that you have to absolutely watch. Ricochet, Swerve, phenomenal, just from start to finish. Ricochet's heel work, great stuff in here. The expressions on Swerve's face when Nana leaves, when he's trying to fight back against Ricochet, being surprised by Ricochet's resilience. Some of the bumps they took was a little unnerving here and there. Nana eventually does come back, grabs the robe, but then he gets wiped out by Ricochet by a tope outside. And unfortunately, I didn't know where they were going with this. I didn't know if Nana because there was a chance that Nana could have turned on Swerve and aligned himself with Ricochet, which would have been weird, but we've seen stranger things happen in wrestling. That did not happen on this show. Swerve Strickland does get the win, does get his win back, and gets the robe back for Nana. Everything is fine in the land of Swerve and Prince Nana, and Ricochet not losing anything from this loss. Ricochet, again, people have been posting up, apologize to Ricochet, because when he came to AEW and he turned heel, and everybody was like, why the hell are you doing this? This is so dumb, and this is so stupid, it's cringe. And Ricochet has turned this character. He is an example of, again, like I always say, some people work better in different companies. Ricochet was in WWE. Yeah, it's the biggest company in the world, but he really didn't fit there at that time. He comes over to AEW, turns heel, and he's doing the best work of his career. From his time in Ring of Honor, WWE, NXT, Lucha Underground, wherever he's been at before, New Japan. This is the best Ricochet I have seen since I've been watching his career for about 10 years now. So hats off to Ricochet on turning that corner. Another banger on this show, because we have a lot of them. Mariah May challenging Toni Storm for the AEW World Championship. Now, here's my suggestion. If you haven't seen this show yet and you're going to go watch it, skip this match when it comes to it and watch this as the main event, and the show will feel a lot better. This, in my opinion, the way it turned out, I think this match should have been the main event. And I know there are people complaining about the time they got and blah, blah, blah. You don't need, if you're analyzing stuff based off of how much time the girls get and the men get, and Mercedes match had this much time, why did this match not have enough time? They didn't need to do, I think this match was perfect the way it was. You don't need to go 20 minutes and then, if you don't go 20 minutes, then the match is not, we don't need to do that. I sometimes I prefer that not every single match, which most of these matches are ending rivalries, has to go 20 to 30 minutes. They don't need to. This match was, I think, about 12, 13 minutes long. It felt like it was a lot longer because these women went right at it from the jump, beating each other up. Poor Luther took the nasty bump on the table in the first 30 seconds when Mariah May drop kicks him on the stage over a table. He falls back on his head. Mariah and Toni go through tables. They've got, oh my God, at one point in time, they pulled out the whole old kickboxer thing where you put you wrap your hand in sticky tape or whatever, and they crushed their fist in these buckets that were full of broken champagne bottles. Again, harkening back to some of the storyline that's been going on for over a year between these two women. And they were gonna fight like they were in like freaking the Kickboxer movie with broken glass fists. Something out of, I think it was an Axel Rotten match and Ian Rotten at one point in time. But Toni socks Mariah in the face. There is blood everywhere. Toni's bleeding. Mariah's bleeding. There's a great overhead shot at one point of Toni just laid out in the middle of the ring with blood all over her face and broken glass everywhere. Poor Aubrey Edwards is cutting her hands up trying to do near fall counts. You had everything in this match. Really fast paced, really great story told. They call back on a lot of things. Toni Storm gets the final win here with Storm Zero back up on the stage again, through the table, gets the win on the stage, the 3 count, and then they put up the end over top. And I think that's, not only is that a cool effect, I think it's a little bit of a message to the wrestling industry that, yeah, we do stories in AEW. For all the people that say we don't, here's the end of this story that we have told for over the last year. So, I thought everything about this was perfect. Mariah May and Toni Storm, a lot of people gave it crap at the beginning because, it's wrestling. It's the IWC, and they give everything crap that isn't instantly a success. And it's like, you had to let this thing, like with the Ricochet thing, you got to let it breathe. You got to stop jumping the gun on everything that isn't instantly awesome to go, oh, this is a mistake. Well, they proved us wrong again with this one. Mariah May and Toni Storm is one of the best rivalries in all of wrestling over the last couple of years. The only people who would say it isn't haven't watched it. That's the only way you can say it isn't. If you watch this along with all the other wrestling, you're going to be like, yeah, this is one of the biggest feuds and one of the best feuds of the last couple of years in wrestling, bar none, is Toni Storm and Mariah May. They knocked it out of the park. Congratulations to them. This is followed up by Konosuke Takeshita defending the International Championship against Kenny Omega, who's making his big singles return against a man who beat him multiple times. They've said it for... It's funny to say this now. This is a thing that they've been mentioning for over a year or so now, that Takeshita beat Kenny Omega. It was like almost 2 years ago. The first week, the first All In, and then an All Out, he beat him twice in 1 week. That nobody else has done that. Kayfabe, right? So Takeshita comes in with the advantage. Omega with the diverticulitis. That's a big question. It's going to be a question for the rest of his career now. This is the era we're in with Kenny Omega. And it provides some very scary moments because I'm always, it's a legitimate thing. He did have diverticulitis. He did have a surgery. He probably shouldn't be wrestling. But he's out there doing this thing, and every gut shot, you just cringe. And these guys, and this is where I say it gets a little gratuitous. These guys like to push it. There's one spot where Takeshita, they're battling over a table. Kenny turns the table over. The crowd actually boos him for a second. He doesn't look like he doesn't know what to do with that. But Takeshita turns the table on its side and then front suplexes Omega on the edge of the table across his stomach. You saw it on camera. And now anybody who has ever set up one of them damn folding tables and it fell over or you bumped against it or something knows how hard the edge of those tables are. If you have ever done that, you know how painful that must have been. And these guys do it for a living, man. But Omega, again, also improving for the 19,000th time, all the people wrong who say that he doesn't know ring psychology. The psychology in this match was excellent. The selling of the potential gut injury, constantly going back to it, him having to change his style, adopt his style, not being able to go for the one-wing angel, Takeshita trying to find those openings, trying to exploit that stuff, and even a little comedy stuff with Don Callis trying to beat up Omega and hurting his hand. He does that all the time. Ultimately, this was probably one of the best Kenny Omega matches I've seen in a long time. Again, he hasn't wrestled in a year, so there's that. But the early AEW Kenny Omega felt like he was missing something, And the New Japan Kenny Omega from the 2010s was a wrestling god, literally. It feels like he's finally melded those two characters together into what we have now as Kenny Omega. Omega already having 2 matches of the year on his resume already. We're just in early March. The guy still can do it, man. His match against Gabe Kidd was amazing. He stole one, probably going to be match of the year for me so far still. And this match with Takeshita is a masterclass in wrestling psychology. I hate to tell that to his haters, but that's what sold this match. It wasn't so much the moves, but what was behind the moves. Omega wins with a reversal, which was, again, another satisfying thing to see. Every match doesn't have to end with finisher spamming or somebody completely obliterating the other guy. You know, sometimes they're wrestling matches. And in order to save face sometimes for some guys, you want them, at the end of the day, it's a contest. And you want somebody to win sometimes by getting a reversal. Otherwise, those reversals don't mean anything. So it's funny, again, some people complain about this stuff, and then they complain about the other stuff. It's just weird. I've seen people complain about the finish to this match and the finish to the next match that was on the card. I'm like, well, which one do you want? You got both. You got a wrestling finish, and you got a guy obliterating the other guy finish, and neither one of them are good for you. It's just... you can tell that before I recorded this, I unfortunately watched other people's reviews. So I'm sorry. I apologize for that. But this match was fantastic. Takeshita and Omega definitely recommended it. Kenny Omega, now you're international champion. So maybe we're going to merge the international and the continental. Sounds too close to an intercontinental championship that we're going to merge here in AEW. But it looks like maybe that's the path we're on. We'll have to see what happens by all in. The semi-main event of the night, I guess, would be Will Ospreay's cage match against Kyle Fletcher. Oh my God. Just ridiculous. I can't do this match. It's Will Ospreay has a reputation. We've seen this from him in New Japan. Those of us New Japan fans have been watching him for years. You know Will Ospreay's always going to push that envelope. This dude him and Fletcher are pushing the envelope in this match. There's blood everywhere. There's people getting hit in the heads with hammers, and they pull out Negan's Lucille baseball bat wrapped in barbed wire. They're stabbing each other in the stomach. Mark Davis comes to the ring. He gets kicked in the face with the door of the cage. He gets color. He's bleeding all over the place. There's thumbtacks. There's everything. I mean, they pulled out the kitchen. It's an AEW pay-per-view. They pulled out the kitchen sink. You're always going to see something crazy. This is where I say, though, it did get too much. I think there was too much in this match. Fletcher at one point takes a Styles Clash on his front side onto the tacks. And the tacks are all where he fell. It's all on the bottom of his body. And Ospreay is pressing his hand. If you go back and look at it, Ospreay is pressing down on the back of Fletcher's legs when he hits the mat, pressing his legs into the thumbtacks. They started the match where both of them sitting on opposite sides of the top of the cage, and it's fitting that the match ended this way. They both wind up back at the top of the cage again. Looks like they're going for a Spanish fly. I'm looking at them going, please do not do this. Did we not see what happened to Edge? Did we not see what happened to Cope? The dude broke his leg. I know you guys are 20 years younger than him and you're made out of rubber, but still, that's not a good idea. And they do the Spanish fly. Ospreay completely screws up you can see his hip is messed up after this because he lands on his hip. He lands on his hip. Fletcher does a flat back bump. I'm sure all of his wind was knocked out of him for probably a good 5 minutes. And even that wasn't enough. Ospreay still has to finish him off. It's really crazy, man. This match was insane. Too much licking of blood too by Fletcher. I don't know what that dude's starting to concern me. Stop licking blood in inanimate objects. It's not hygienic. Not at all. But it was a great match. The only thing is, I think it may have gone 5 minutes too long, and I think they just went a little bit too far. And there is times where it just becomes gratuitous. And I think they went over the line into gratuity. If they had scaled it back a little bit, it probably would have been perfect. But I'm not complaining about it. I'm definitely recommending it. Definitely a match. But I think getting to that gratuitous level is what takes some marks off for me. But your mileage may vary. You may have loved it that they went that far. In the main event, these two poor men, Copeland, Adam Copeland, Edge, whatever you want to call him, challenging for the AEW World Championship against Jon Moxley. And these dudes had to follow Takeshita and Omega, Ospreay and Fletcher, and Mariah May and Toni Storm. There was nothing they could. Now, well, there are things they could have done. Hindsight being 2020, I'm sure they would probably do it differently if they could take it back now. But they couldn't follow those matches. And they started out, there was a lot of stuff they did. The first 3/4 of this match, the crowd was dead. They're trying to do spots that they think they're going to get a crowd reaction with exchanging forearms. Crowd's not buying it. Submissions, crowd doesn't care. Crowd does not care about this match at all. And this is the unfortunate thing with what's going on with Moxley and the Death Riders. And it needs an overhaul. And I think fans were just giving it, because I think the anticipation was Mox was going to lose the title tonight. Because I don't think anybody wants this Death Riders thing going on any longer. They would not get their wish. But before we get to that, I think that the match came alive with the ref bump. Rinsberg did a great job as a referee arguing with Mox the entire time. Him taking a bump led to the match at least being something to watch and pay attention to. You get Wheeler Yuta coming out there. Wheeler Yuta, who's been back and forth with whether or not he really agrees with what's going on. He's kind of like this captive who's got Stockholm Syndrome, as I've seen a lot of people. I see a lot of people talk about this. They can never remember what the phrase is. It's Stockholm. It's called Stockholm Syndrome. And Stockholm Syndrome is when you're so traumatized by your abuser, you kind of align with your abuser and you kind of side with them because you're used to the abuse. And that's what's going on with Wheeler Yuta. I don't think this is going to get a resolution until whenever Danielson comes back, because Yuta's still using the Psycho knee. He used it tonight. You thought it was maybe he's going to hit Mox. He hit Cope. I think that's where this is going to come to a head with Wheeler Yuta whenever Danielson comes back for the one-off match against Wheeler Yuta. Mox is happy that he's on the side. Switchblade Jay White comes out. He tries to battle back. This is another thing people were speculating, that maybe Jay White was going to turn on Cope tonight. He doesn't, but he does accidentally hit Cope, and a nasty shot with the briefcase. It was really nasty, really sounded horrible. And then he fights to the back, so he stops watching Cope's back. He actually almost made Copeland lose the match. I wonder if that was intentional. They're going to bring that up at some point in time, but who knows? It's a little complicated. But we didn't get the Jay White heel turn. We didn't get the Wheeler Yuta face turn. But we did get something else. As all this chaos is going on, somebody comes out in a dark garb, and it turns out to be Christian, who is signing his contract. He's cashing in his not money in a bank briefcase contract. He puts himself in a match. It's a 3-way match. Yeah. You've seen this 1,000 times before. So there's something. Okay, well, Christian might win a championship. Christian doesn't win a championship. Cope doesn't win a championship. Mox winds up retaining. There was a clever spot. I did love this one spot though, when Mox has got Christian in that bulldog headlock, and Christian is Cope is flat out on the mat, and Christian tries to reach his arm over, and he gets a near fall before Mox pulls him away. That was that was cool. That was a really good spot, but that one brilliant spot does not make up for the fact that this match just fell flat on so many different levels. And we did not get the outcome that I don't think any fans wanted Mox coming away with this title after this match. But he does, and we'll have to see what's next. Well, we wouldn't have to wait too long, as Mox is making his way out the arena. Swerve Strickland attacks him, leaping from the balcony onto Mox and a bunch of security. And, of course, now Swerve is the next challenger for the AEW World Championship. I like that little bit of a post-credit scene there that we got from AEW. I think they should do more of that more often. Apparently, after the show, too, Swerve and Cope had some words in the ring. And that was AEW Revolution, a pay-per-view that if you took 2 matches off and put Mariah May and Toni Storm as the main event, I think you would have walked away with a great show. I think you would have walked away with a great main event. And it should have, and there's no reason why the women's world title match could not have main evented this show. I think that may have been a missed opportunity there. And looking back at the way this card was structured, I think you could, if moving some of the matches around, you may have had a better flow to this show. But That's, again, hindsight's 2020. These guys, they don't know this stuff going in. They don't know what the momentum is going to be. You kind of ride it, and it's up to the performers. It's up to the main event guys to live up, even after, to outdo what's been the unoutdoable that came before you. I think one way they probably could have gotten some energy back in that match is if Cope had speared. They had some shenanigans, and they got all of the shenanigans out at the beginning of the match. Cope spears Mox. I'm fantasy booking here now, sorry, but Cope would go for the spear, get a very, 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 very big near fall on Mox to start the match off and kind of, get the excitement back up. But again, that's a tough spot for them to be in. I can't totally, obviously it's Jon Moxley and Adam Copeland. They're some of the best in the business, in the history of the business. They know how to do this stuff. I think this situation just was not the best situation for them. So I want to know what you guys think. Let your voice be heard in the comment box below. Did you enjoy AEW Revolution? Again, I recommend this show. AEW pay-per-views are always where they shine the most. And again, MJF and Hangman recommended. Swerve Strickland and Ricochet recommended. Toni Storm and Mariah May recommended. Konosuke Takeshita and Kenny Omega recommended. And Will Ospreay and Kyle Fletcher recommended. So it's a lot. There's a lot of great wrestling on this show. You're definitely going to get your money's worth. But again, let me know what you guys thought about the show in the comment box below. And until next time, I'll see you guys here for more news, rumors, and reviews on the Rantin Review Pro Wrestling. Have a good day.